Elizabeth Gunn is there, as well as Susan Cummins Miller. So a special welcome to them. Thank you for joining us today. I hope I haven't missed any other local authors. Are there any others out there that I've missed? I should mention that Mike's part of this presentation is going to be recorded, just so you will know that that's happening. Now, speaking today on the effect of place and time on mystery is local author J.M. Hayes. J.M. Mike Hayes was born and raised on the flat earth of his 6 Mad Dog and Englishman mysteries, which feature a Kansas sheriff and his wannabe Cheyenne brother. His standalone novels are also set where, if not when, he lived. Mike graduated from Wichita State University in anthropology and did 3 years of postgraduate work at the University of Arizona. He lives in Tucson with his wife, several computers, thousands of books, and a small herd of German Shepherds. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you very much. I want to toss out a couple of apologies first before we get started here too. First of all, I'm not an orator. I'm a writer, and so I'm going to be reading to you instead of speaking without notes. As I'm sure you're all aware, virtually every politician does that these days, but they have these lovely reflector things that make it look like they're looking out at the audience all the time. I don't have that. All I have is 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper in front of me. So I would suggest that since I do have some pictures, watch those instead of the man behind the curtain. I also want to apologize for some of the quality of some of the photos. Some of them are quite old. Some of them are from other sources. One is even a blown up piece of a 16mm film. And when you see that one, you recognize how poor the quality is in it. But it's the only one I have of that particular subject. So to time and place, and let me see if I can actually do all the things I'm supposed to do here. And it appears that I can. So, on October the 16th, 1940, a Tohono village, or Papago as they were known, was raided because it had failed to register its young men for the new military draft. It was a traditional village whose people were unaware that they lived in the United States. Indian agents had come a few days before to make a list of draft-eligible young men. The headman, Pia Machita, refused to cooperate. At 2 a.m. on the 16th, U.S. Marshals rushed the village and took the 80-something-year-old chief into custody. His people objected, freed their leader, and ran the lawman off. Angered, the authorities reinforced themselves and returned, only to discover that the villagers had disappeared into the desert. They weren't found again until May of 1941. At the time of the hunt for the missing Indians, Tucson had a population of 37,000. The city was filled with rumors that the Japanese might invade Arizona by way of the Sea of Cortez in order to cut off winter access to America's west coast. An emergency plan had been developed to evacuate Tucson and hide citizens in the foothills. Some Tucsonans believed a Japanese submarine had landed in Mexico, supplying weapons and explosives meant to support Indian uprisings. The Great Pilgrim is a fictionalized mix of real events and those rumors. Its characters are caught up in circumstances largely beyond their comprehension. People from different backgrounds and cultures seek a variety of approaches toward honorable solutions, some peaceful, some not. Traditional Tahana Atam culture uses a symbol to represent how everyone faces the complexities of life. They call it the man in the maze, here woven into a basket. Oops. By the time I learned about the incident from a 1981 article in the Journal of Arizona History by Elmer Flacus, I had lived in Tucson for 13 years. The story stuck in my mind. I had been trying and failing to sell short stories, so in 1986, I decided the natural next step was to attempt to write a novel. And so I chose to base it on Pia Machita's war. I was in the right place, Tucson, at the wrong time. The city had exploded in size to about 400,000 people, and it had been free from the threat of Indian revolts for nearly half a century. Still, many parts of the old downtown remained available to me, and I could drive west onto the reservation where the landscape was little changed. But how to find the characters of 1940s Tucson, the culture of our city, and of those people who refused to register for the draft in 1940? I moved to Tucson to attend graduate school in anthropology, so I had extensive experience in finding source materials. To remain true to the time, I based my research on Tahana A'atam ethnographic studies written in the 30s and 40s, and I read a great deal of the Arizona Daily Star and the Tucson Citizen from that time on microfilm. Headlines to classifieds, ads, stories, editorials, and local coverage of the Pia Machita incident. It was exactly what I needed. Names changed, as did personalities. Pia Machita, which translates as no matate, became Huhul, or Zigzag. A fictional deputy United States Marshal, J.D. Fitzpatrick, became my novel's main character and a man trying to stop a war rather than begin one. Events were created or deleted for my convenience, as well as the readers. What if, I wondered, a University of Anthropology graduate student had been doing field work with the village that disappeared? What if many of the rumors about the Japanese had been based on fact? What if a Japanese agent provocateur even tried to enlist the missing Indians in destroying infrastructure and sowing terror here in southern Arizona? The novel was published in 1990. A revised paperback edition was released almost simultaneously with my next novel in 2000. I know that's a big gap, but that's another story. In my opinion, novels can only succeed if they have believable characters with whom readers can relate. And two of those characters, in their own way, must be place and time in nearly every book. My Mad Dog and Englishman series is set in fictional Benton County, Kansas, loosely based on Reno County, Kansas, where I grew up. I turned Benton County into a much less populated place than Reno, but once you get out of the Hutchinson metropolitan area, about 40,000 people, Reno is filled with appropriate places that I knew very, very well and continued to know as I still visited them regularly and was in touch with family and friends living there. When I began the series, time and place for Mad Dog and Englishman didn't require much research. First of the Mad Dog and Englishman series is set on the first day of summer in 1997. The story takes place in less than 24 hours. That became a consistent rule for the series. They're all 24-hour or less mysteries. Another rule is that nothing ever happens in Benton County, but when it does, everything that can go wrong will. It's a Murphy's Law kind of place. To most people, Kansas is just that flat rectangular state you see on the interstate as you're going somewhere else, as you also see on the screen, or as you fly over when you're in even more of a hurry. My title characters are Sheriff English and his half-brother, Harvey Edward Maddox, nicknamed Mad Dog because of his starring role back when he was a high school football hero. The brothers are distant descendants of Native Americans. Mad Dog is serious about the relationship. He is a wannabe Cheyenne shaman and the town's oddball. Once his name, Maddox, evolved into Mad Dog, English had become Englishman. No coward bears responsibility. Mad Dogs and Englishmen go out in the midday sun, as he so eloquently put it. On a hot, humid, tornado weather kind of day, Mad Dog begins a vision quest in the Buffalo Springs Town Park before sunrise. Since his hair is too curly to braid, he shaves his head. Unable to find a suitable breechcloth, he has fallen back on a black Speedo. He's covered with black body paint he bought in a Wichita sex shop, and further decorated with white body paint bolts of lightning. He wears a single raven feather and a headband, though he has to admit it's probably a crow feather since there are no ravens in central Kansas. While in the park, Mad Dog discovers a mutilated human body. It's the first murder in the history of Buffalo Springs and Benteen County. The idea for examining how a small town deals with its first homicide came from what happened in Arlington, Kansas, my father's Reno County birthplace. Long after the idyllic days of Dad's childhood, on October 29, 1984, 2-year-old twin boys and their teenage babysitter were murdered with a shotgun not far from the boys' home. The horror of the act was magnified by the banality of the motive. The killer owed money for traffic tickets and gasoline. He'd heard rumors that the twins' parents dealt drugs. These rumors were grossly exaggerated. The parents were at their jobs, so he entered the house planning to rob it, and there were the twins and their babysitter. He stole everything he could find, including change, about $15 in all, a little under $40 today. Then he eliminated the witnesses. What you're seeing there is Arlington, Kansas, which is a little bit like what I envision downtown Buffalo Springs to be like. Not many of the buildings still there. Some have burned down, some have been abandoned, torn down. It's central Kansas. It's not exactly growing or terribly successful anymore, except for corporate farming. Acts like that murder change places and their residences. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry, Sally. Down there in the corner, that's your dad, just in case you didn't notice. Stepping away from his Mercedes. We were going to the little cafe across the street, which every one of these towns has one of. Best food in the world, worst service, they advertise. Acts like that murder change places and their residents. Arlington had been one of those towns where no one locked their doors or worried about leaving a purse in their car or keys in their ignition. No more. And they weren't so sure about trusting neighbors either, not even after the murderer was caught. There are still those who think the wrong guy was arrested. Mad Dog and Englishman isn't Arlington's story, but what I learned from reactions to that crime helped me shape my novel and my series. For all that Arlington suffered that day, at least it wasn't struck by a tornado, nor did the county's manhunt reach its climax atop the local grain elevator. Yes, Kansas does have skyscrapers. I wrote 5 more books in the series. As the years passed and my family was no longer available, my connections to Kansas grew weaker. Writing about my native state proved harder from 1,000 miles away. Thanks to the internet, I kept up with my hometown's daily newspaper. I stayed close to current when I supplemented that with phone calls to old friends, classmates, and occasional trips. For the next 3 books in the Mad Dog and Englishman series, I got in the habit of borrowing from descriptions from my previous book reviews. Thus, number 2 in the Mad Dog and Englishman series became Prairie Gothic. Four years have passed. It's a bitterly cold January day before dawn. Mad Dog steals the corpse of a recently deceased Choctaw from the local elder care home in order to give it an appropriate treetop burial. Soon after, an Englishman finds himself at the same care facility investigating the body of a dead baby. One of the residents, a woman with severe dementia, is in the habit of carrying a doll for comfort. Somewhere along the way, she has traded one for the other. Another resident has relevant information. She's a tiny old woman wearing ruby red shoes, and she claims she's the original Dorothy. In this book, I introduced a new and very important character, Haley. She's a wolf hybrid rescue and uncommonly smart. Mad Dog considers her his Nisimon. That's the Cheyenne term for a familiar, like a witch's black cat. And Haley does possess what seems a supernatural tendency to show up whenever Mad Dog most desperately needs her. Mad Dog's Haley got her name from a German Shepherd my wife Barbara and I rescued. Her previous owner had neglected her care and dropped her off at a vet. He wanted to have her put down. Instead, they nursed her back to health and started looking for a permanent home. We were just going to foster her, but after 24 hours, she was ours for keeps. Haley Marie got her name because her rescue was a little like a Hail Mary pass in football. She had a habit of magical appearances, all right, though mostly when tennis balls were involved. The dog that you're actually seeing in the picture was a previous German Shepherd. His name was Wendigo. That's spring break in Kansas, not exactly the crowds at the beach, but it does give you a good idea of the kind of landscape that we dealt with, and that's a nice winter view. The Wendigo is drinking water from a buffalo waller. We had quite a number of those in our pasture. The pasture had never been plowed, and at least I was told that that's what they were, old buffalo wallers that had never filled in. More words for a review became number 3 in the series, Plains Crazy. It's a perfect spring day. Mad Dog goes for his customary run before sunrise beside a pasture in which a reality TV series is being filmed. Its theme is how modern families might adapt to survive if they were suddenly transported to a 19th century Indian encampment. PBS's Frontier House series was the source for that idea. A teenage participant ends up dead with a Cheyenne arrow in his back. Englishman not only has to investigate that murder, Buffalo Springs is receiving terror threats and bombings. Englishman's life is further complicated because his wife expects him to join her on a flight to Paris before sunset. The last description I borrowed from a review was Broken Heartland. Fall, election day. The opposition has found a perfect candidate, an Iraq war hero they expect will unseat Englishmen. The sheriff's chances at the ballot box slip further when his deputy, while chasing a speeder, rams a school bus containing the town's teen choir. Mad Dog and the sheriff's daughters react to premonitions that Englishman is in trouble and hurry home to Buffalo Springs. They're right. There's an active shooter situation at the local high school. And when Englishman finds free time, he has another problem to consider, since Buffalo Springs doesn't have a teen choir. The fifth in the series is Server Down. One of the sheriff's daughters is in Tucson for a law school conference. She learns of the Pascua Yaqui Easter ceremonies and calls Mad Dog. He drives to Tucson with Haley and goes straight to the village, where he is assaulted by a man resembling a character in an online computer game. A policeman comes to Mad Dog's aid and is killed. Mad Dog gets the blame and becomes the target of a Tucson-wide manhunt. Englishman, back in Kansas, learns of Mad Dog's wild story. The sheriff's receptionist is hooked on the same game. She and Englishman log in as Mad Dog. His avatar is immediately attacked and killed by the demon Mad Dog has described. And that demon seems capable of reaching out of the internet and launching deadly assaults, not only online, but in Kansas and Tucson too. In the last two novels of the series, I moved some of the action to Tucson. That helped solve my increasing problem with accurately depicting changes in modernizing Kansas. Well, sort of modernizing Kansas. Benteen County and Tucson in those last two books. From reviewers and, comments from reviewers were no longer as appropriate for titles. The sixth in the series is English Lessons. It's Christmas. It's Mad Dog, now living just outside of Tucson, and he's been mistaken for a rival drug dealer by a cartel assassin. One of Englishman's daughters has taken the deputy's position with a Tucson area tribal police force. She discovers the gruesome details of an assassinated Arizona governor. Englishman in Kansas deals with threats between neighbors exchanged because of one's Christmas yard decorations. Someone spoiled them by leaving a greeting spelled out with yellow snow. The victim angrily threatens to kill the neighbor he thinks responsible. The revenge seeker's wife persuades Englishman to hold her husband's gun somewhere safe until he cools down. And that starts a rumor among local militia types. The sheriff, they decide, is acting on orders from the feds and has begun confiscating guns, just as they've always known would happen. They seize the courthouse and wait for the black helicopters, while Englishman and his Tucson family hope for a Christmas miracle's arrival. The Spirit in the Skull was the eighth novel I wrote. This was my big experimental novel, which may be why it's the last one I published. The place is the North Slope of the Brooks Range in Alaska. The Brooks are the northernmost mountains in the US. Time in this story varies depending on whether our hero, Raven, really is the shaman he claims to be. His natural time is roughly 15,000 years ago, but he's having strange dreams in which he is only a skull interacting with a stranger from the distant future. That future suffers from disastrous climate change. The Earth Mother, the Earth Mother goddess demands Raven repair the future and, in his own time, stop the murderers stalking his band. So this is pretty much your typical prehistoric time travel dystopian murder mystery. Once upon a time, the summer of 1967 to be precise, I had the great good fortune to be invited to join an archaeological project on the north slope of the Brooks Range. We were searching for evidence of the earliest humans to migrate into the New World across the Bering Land Bridge. We flew to May Lake, there in the background. May Lake is approximately a mile long, if that helps you get an idea for scale there. It's named May Lake because it traditionally becomes ice-free in May. We spent 2 months on the tundra, the most beautiful place and the harshest that I've ever experienced. The Arctic hadn't begun climate warming to a noticeable degree then, because big game and their hunters thrived in that ice age environment. I didn't have to change the setting much from the one I experienced that summer, just some of the animals. Life is hard on the North Slope. To cross the tundra, you must step from one wobbly tussock of sedge grass to another, misjudge, and you might break a leg or plunge into an icy, mud-filled crevasse, knee-deep or more. The Saber-toothed lions, dire wolves, and cave bears are no longer there, but grizzlies, wolves, moose, caribou, wolverines, and other bloodthirsty creatures, mosquitoes, for instance, make life challenging. This, by the way, was actually a very light mosquito day. The area we worked was a huge empty place north of the tree line and north of the last glaciation. We found evidence of those early hunters we sought in the form of stone tools that were washed out of terraces into nearby streams. In order to date those tools and the people who made them, we needed to find them in situ, in a place where they remained associated with extinct fauna or human remains or an obvious campsite. We found a number of mammoth tusks along streams and creeks. This one lay beside a mammoth tooth, making us think the rest of the beast might just be below. It seemed an ideal place to dig because the tusk had been crudely cut by stone tools, and you can see where it was cut off there, though you can't see the picture's quality is not quite up to showing you the cut marks. Excavating permafrost is even harder than it sounds. One evidence of permafrost are these polygonal wedges that you see in the foreground. Permafrost is probably still in existence in all of this, but there's a bit of a rise here, and so the drainage is better, and so you don't see the polygonal ice wedges. Frozen mud, for the most part, is what permafrost is made of. Winter snow and ice can't soak into surface that freezes solid every winter. In summer, that soil melts, surrounding vegetation with muck. Some water drains into lakes, streams, rivers, and even the Arctic Ocean. This freezing melting cycle churns things, gradually mixing what's on the surface with layers below. Conditions for digging during winter's long, cold night are hardly ideal. In summer, they're not much better. It's light and the surface melts, but permafrost is still only inches or maybe a foot or so below, depending on drainage. Permafrost in our trenches always began only a few inches down. We managed to excavate our Mammoth Trench to nearly 4 feet at the tusk and tooth location. I'm going to pause here real quickly just to explain that Dr. Agon Viegel, who is over here in the corner, is holding the handle of a shovel, showing you approximately how deep the water is in that part of the trench. We discovered as we began digging that there was an area that didn't melt as quickly, and it sort of rose up gradually as if there were a mammoth lying there. And so we thought we got to add another trench going in that direction to see if we can find him. So this guy is standing in water that's only about just below the top of his boots, but considerably different from the water that's in this trench. So find my place again here. This was where we found both the mammoth and the tusk. In summer's constant daylight, nearly every day was at least a little above freezing. We always returned to our trenches to find them full of water. It took hours to bail the deeper ones out. Then we could only scrape another inch or two of soil before reaching solidly frozen earth again. We found no more of this mammoth and no evidence that prehistoric humans killed it or cut the tusk. Eskimos might have done the cutting. They carved ivory tusks into ornaments, spear points, and harpoon heads in both prehistoric and historic times. In my novel, excuse me, old voices don't hold up as well as young ones. In my novel, both time and place were supplied by our research and our experiences in the field. The future North Slope is based on further research. what has been done to the tundra to extract fossil fuels and by the world's use of them, also by my imagination. There is now, for instance, a highway approximately 100 miles that way, and also the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, where there are a lot more leaks than you ever hear about. Oops, wrong direction. In 1967, we flew out of Bettelsfield, Alaska, by bush plane to May Lake Bettelsfield. Bettelsfield was 100 miles south, but the nearest base from which we might reasonably make our flights. We were 50 miles northwest of an Eskimo village in Anaktuvuk Pass, and 50 miles southwest of an occasionally inhabited base camp at Umiat on the Colville River. With the exception of hunters or researchers who might be elsewhere on the tundra, we were alone. I saw no sign of current humans during our time in the field, except when we received supply flights and one visit from a curious bush pilot. That and contrails from passenger jets on the polar route and Air Force bombers flying Sachs nuclear umbrella around the clock. The Arctic inspires awe. It was almost like being on an alien planet. It has changed considerably since we were there, though it is not yet as awful as the future I imagined in The Spirit in the Skull. Few places in the world inspire their own mental health disorders. There was one case of Arctic hysteria in Anaktuvuk Pass that summer. We were able to follow it irregularly with our shortwave receiver. None of us experienced the condition, though you may disagree after you hear some more of my stories. Every time I topped a ridge, I half expected to see a herd of mammoth feeding along the swampy lakes and streams that surrounded us, and possibly the Paleolithic big game hunters who might be stalking them. There were no forests to hide them, only clumps of dwarf willows along streams and rivers. The willows might be only a few feet tall or top out at about 8 feet. We also saw the rare small aspen on a south-facing slope, one that hadn't yet succumbed to the extremes of cold and wind. I climbed to the top of a ridge just above our camp one morning late in the summer and watched as a dark carpet of caribou flowed out of a gap in the Canoe Hills north of May Lake. The great fall migration had begun. There were thousands at least, maybe tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands. We experienced up close and personal encounters with grizzly bears and a few huge moose. We and they walked away each time unharmed. The mosquito population was a nightmare. When we were forced to walk across swaths of tundra on days with little or no wind, they swarmed so thickly we seemed to have small clouds billowing about our heads. When we were foolish enough to try to talk, we inhaled a few. After one such afternoon, we returned to our tents. Some mosquitoes accompanied us inside the netting. One of our crew members dug out his nail scissors and carefully clipped the wings off as many as he was able. Oops. Went the wrong way. Sorry. We camped just above the small, crystal clear stream. It was about 3 or 4 feet across, mostly wadable. It wasn't on any maps, and so our expedition's leader named it Sedna Creek. Sedna is the Eskimo goddess of the animals. That creek was where we found most of the artifacts we collected. One day, while searching for artifacts, a crew member looked up and discovered a woman dressed in animal skins and furs standing beside the stream near him. Shocked, he turned to look for the man he'd been working with to point the woman out. His friend wasn't in sight. When he looked back, the woman had disappeared. He went to the spot where she'd stood and found no evidence she'd been there. The nearest Eskimos were in that village 50 miles away, and they didn't wear traditional costuming anything like what he had seen. Imagination, some unusual combination of light and shadow in the scrub brush along the stream. The goddess Sedna herself. Whoops. The Earth Mother, as depicted, in this figurine from Paleolithic France, the Venus of Lesbian. He never found an answer, but he left a small offering in hope that a goddess, if she existed, might smile on our efforts to find the remains of her ancient worshippers. If so, she didn't smile enough. None of the rest of us had a similar sighting, but I do remember a night shortly after the sun began setting and our 24 hours of summer daylight ended. At dusk, a thick fog crawled in and hid the stream that May Lake. Only ridge tops, high hills, and crags of distant mountains remained visible. There was no wind, not a breath. But we heard voices. We couldn't understand what they were saying, or even whether it might be English, but they sounded close, maybe even on the stream just below our camp. Did someone pass us in the fog? Did time bend and allow us to hear conversations from a camp of the people we hunted? Or were atmospheric conditions such that we heard voices from many, many miles away? Again, we have no answers. The Arctic seemed such a strange and mysterious place that any explanation felt possible. We watched as dramatic curtains of the aurora borealis danced across the sky above us and to the south. And a sudden stab of violently green light reached up toward them from the uninhabited Brooks Range. I had never seen anything like it, but its brilliant, eerie green was identical to laser light shows I've been to since. A secret military signal, a reflection of the aurora off some icy slope or glacier that somehow reflected and focused the light, making it far brighter than the aurora. Aliens phoning home. Anything seemed possible. Climate change has done massive damage to that wondrous landscape already. I wrote The Spirit in the Skull in an effort to preserve my memories of that fantastic place, and as a warning of what we are losing, perhaps forever. The place I wrote about seemed unstably linked in time. My book is an effort to memorialize that shifting time and disappearing place in a work of fiction where such things seem almost possible. Thank you very much. And I will stop sharing the screen. And escape.
Thank
That's
you.
great.
Thank you very much, Mike. Fascinating, especially the part about the Arctic. We do have a couple of questions. One was, did anyone attempt to draw the vision?
No.
And what?
Only one person saw it, and he was not an artist. He did attempt to describe it in a novel of his own, in a somewhat different situation. It's more fictionalized.
What are, you mentioned Arctic hysteria. What are the symptoms of Arctic hysteria?
Hysteria, anxiety, depression, an inability to sit still, hyperactivity. It was considered to be quite common, primarily among the early explorers and to some extent among the Eskimos, but I think it's probably more related to the long, dark winters and what we think of as sad. Where you can't see the sun, where you can't get out, where you can't do things. You're stuck, much like we were the last year.
Here's another one for you. Given the immensity of the tundra, how did the dig directors decide where to work? Did they survey? How did you decide where to dig?
Well, there had been a preliminary expedition in 1964. And so he knew where the artifacts were occurring, that they were occurring along this strip of stream, and became much rarer as you got further downstream. And once in a great while in a larger stream or river, certainly what we would call a river if it was here in Arizona. And also, we found the location of that tusk and tooth, and they were both right in the same place, and it just seemed unlikely that that they would have both washed to that place somehow over all those centuries, unless they had started out somehow together, and maybe more of them were still there, but it didn't turn out to be the case. We did also dig a number of trenches into the terraces in hope of trying to get some idea of whether there were artifacts there, and also maybe if we could luck out and find some evidence of someone having camped on one of those terraces. We didn't have that luck, and we also discovered that our ability to put in the number of trenches and to dig them to the depth that we really wanted to was just not possible.
Diane Ransdell has a comment here. She said, I think I used to get Arctic hysteria in Illinois. Seemed like the Arctic.
That's possible.
Couple more for you.
Mhm.
Let me see here. Have you done readings in your hometown in Kansas? And if so, what was the reaction?
I'm sorry, have I done what in my hometown?
Book readings of your books.
When the first version of the Great Pilgrim came out in 1990, there was a bookstore in Hutchinson. There were two other little bookstores that were part of giant corporate conglomerates, and they chose all the books that would be sold there and were not open to considering anything that wasn't on their list of pre-approved stuff. But I did do one signing in Hutchinson in 1990, shortly after the book came out. I also did a signing over in Wichita, and I did a number of events in Manhattan, Kansas, where Kansas State is. That was the home of the Great Manhattan Mystery Conclave, which was held in the Little Apple, as they like to call it.
You incorporate so many current issues in your books. Well, all of them, but especially the Mad Dog series. School killings, election fraud, issues surrounding computer games. And certainly the last one where the militia took over the courthouse reminded me very much of what happened in Washington on January.
Yeah, that kind of, I had not really thought about that for a while, but it was oddly appropriate.
Yeah, oddly prescient, I guess.
Or inappropriate.
Do you read the newspaper in search of writing fodder, or where do your ideas come from?
Yeah, no, I mean, watch
The
news and read lots of other books. I read history, I read mysteries, I read science fiction, I read good novels. Anything that catches my interest. Not mentioned was one of the main characters in the first Mad Dog and Englishman book is a Black historian who is searching for information about the migrations into bloody Kansas and blacks trying to get away from slave states. And he meets up with a very racist police, well, um, sheriff's deputy, who happens to be related to the local authorities, and so Englishman can't fire him.
Kathy asks, do you imagine a connection between Mad Dog and Raven the shaman?
Um, I don't see them as very similar characters for the most part. Mad Dog is something of an oddball, but he's very serious about what he's doing. And Raven, as described in the book, is actually, he's a shaman, but he's an agnostic. He doesn't really believe in the gods that he's representing. He needed to find a place for himself in his tribe, and that worked out. And then, lo and behold, he begins meeting a character who claims to be the Earth Goddess, and who just must leave.
This is sort of a personal question, Mike. I read the entire Mad Dog and Englishman series,
Thank
and
you.
I was very sad when it ended because I'd come to care about your recurring characters. And I think they've got more story to tell, Mike. I really do.
Perhaps they should. I had always intended to go back and at least end the series appropriately. But I ran into, well, I had I needed to step away from the series for just a little bit, and had wanted to do the Spirit and the Skull for a very long time. I did that. My mother-in-law went into deep dementia. We had to find a place for her. Her husband was in his middle 90s. His health was failing rapidly. He was a retired major general who did not take well to suggestions about how that should be done and about slowing down. And our life got very, very, very full for a while, and I was unable to concentrate on much of anything. And then they both died, and they gave us their house. So we moved here, which is a very big deal, even though we only moved about 10 miles. And then that summer, I came down with cancer and had surgery and 6 months of treatments. And I tried to write something while I was in treatment, but I learned about how those drugs affect your brain, and I discovered that what I had written was really pretty trashy. So I sat down and tried to write something else, and by that time it just felt like it had been such a long time since Mad Dog and Englishman, and also my publisher had changed hands. And so I decided to try to write something that I thought they would be more interested in. They weren't. So now I'm not sure where I'm going. I might try another Mad Dog and Englishman. At the moment, I'm a retired author.
Well, I hope that changes eventually, Mike. I really do. I think I got all the questions that were being asked. One thing I do want to tell everybody is that the Pima County Public Library has been very supportive of this series. And that support has taken the form of actual books. They have bought multiple titles from all of our authors and have added them to the collection. Some of them may still be in processing, but I know that quite a few have now been processed. So I hope that you will encourage people to check out the library, check out as many of the titles from all of our authors, because I know I have certainly enjoyed the ones that I've had the opportunity to read. So if there's, Jody, is there anything else that we need to cover?
If people would like to unmute themselves and say anything, feel free. I just be sure to alert people to our April speakers.
Right.
Yeah.
Kathy McIntosh, April 20th at 7 p.m. It's a Tuesday night. So as part of our developing this series, we have been experimenting with different time frames to see which one seems to fit people's lifestyle. But anyway, April 20th will be our last one for the spring. So I hope you'll join us then.
Thank you everybody for enjoying it.
Susan,
Thank you, Mike.
Nancy, I do have a question. How, I know you're recording this, how could we have access to the recording?
Well,